The winter decided everything before a single word was spoken. Snow wrapped the Wyoming ranch in silence so deep it felt deliberate, as if the land itself was listening. The main house stood firm against the wind, but inside something older than the weather was about to break. When the son stepped into his father's study, he understood instinctively that whatever waited for him would not be softened by time, blood, or memory. The father did not invite him to sit. He stood near the window, broad shoulders squared, a man who had built his life by never bending. The fire cracked behind him, but its warmth never reached the room. The son had faced blizzards, runaway cattle, and long nights alone on the range. Yet none of that prepared him for the stillness in his father's voice. "The ranch is bleeding," the father said, calm and precise. Not from the land, from the world changing around it. He spoke of railroads pressing closer, of banks demanding signatures instead of handshakes, of lawyers circling old boundaries like wolves that smelled weakness. Every sentence landed like a calculation, not a concern. This was not a confession. It was a diagnosis. The son listened without interrupting, jaw tight, hands at his sides. He had known trouble was coming. Everyone did. But hearing it spoken this way stripped it of hope. "There are families arriving," the father continued. "3 of them. Strong names, strong connections. Their daughters are of age." The words settled slowly, their meaning unfolding like frost across glass. The son felt his chest tighten. "This is not a discussion," the father said, turning at last. His eyes were steady, almost kind in their certainty. "You will choose one. The marriage will secure the ranch. Their lawyers will protect the land. Their money will silence the banks." "And if I refuse?" the son asked. His voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. The father did not hesitate. "You leave. You take nothing. No land. No name. No place here." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind struck the house hard enough to make the windows shudder. The son realized then that this moment had been shaped for years, maybe decades. Every lesson, every expectation, every withheld word had led here. "This isn't about survival," the son said quietly. "It's about control." The father's expression did not change. Control is survival. That was the truth of the man. He had ruled the ranch the way winter ruled the plains, without apology. Fear had been his tool, discipline his language. He believed loyalty came from pressure, not choice. The son thought of the land he had grown up on, the long rides at dawn, the nights spent fixing fences in the dark, the people who depended on the ranch not just for wages but for belonging. He also thought of the parts of himself that had never belonged to his father at all. "You have until the families arrive," the father said. "After that, your decision becomes public." The meeting was over. No embrace, no advice, just terms. As the son stepped back into the cold, the wind cut through his coat, sharp and unforgiving. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the yard, each step heavier than the last. The ranch loomed around him, massive and familiar, yet suddenly foreign. Every building felt like it was watching him, waiting to see whether he would submit or disappear. He understood now that the ultimatum was not just about marriage. It was about obedience disguised as duty. The father was testing whether blood could be overridden by fear, whether love for the land could be turned into a leash. The son paused and looked out across the frozen fields. Somewhere beyond the barns and fences was a life that belonged to him alone, but choosing it would cost everything he had been taught to value. Staying would mean surrendering something just as vital. The winter wind howled again, relentless, indifferent. It did not care who ruled the ranch or who walked away from it. And for the first time, the son wondered whether survival meant holding on or daring to let go. The stable smelled of hay, leather, and cold breath. It was the only place on the ranch where the son felt the weight on his chest ease, even if just a little. The animals shifted in their stalls, restless from the storm outside, and their quiet sounds grounded him in a way the main house never had. Here, there were no ultimatums, only work, routine, and truth. She was already there, moving between the stalls with practiced care. Her coat was worn thin at the elbows, her gloves patched more than once. She spoke softly to the horses as she worked, her voice steady, never rushed. She had grown up on the edges of places like this, passed from one hard job to another, learning early that silence and discipline kept her safe. On this ranch, she had become essential without ever being acknowledged. When she noticed him, she did not smile right away. She read his face first. "It's late," she said. "Your father doesn't like it when you disappear." "He doesn't like much," he replied, trying to sound light. It didn't work. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He spoke to you today." It wasn't a question. Everyone on the ranch felt the tension spreading like cold through wood. The son nodded. He leaned against the stall door, suddenly unsure how to begin. With her, pretending felt dishonest, but telling the truth felt dangerous. "He wants me to marry," he said. "Soon." She didn't react at first. Her hands kept moving, brushing down a horse's neck, checking its legs. When she finally looked at him, her expression was calm, but her eyes were not. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. He frowned. "You're not surprised?" "No," she answered. "This ranch has always been about deals. I just hoped you might get a choice." He laughed quietly, without humor. "So did I." The wind rattled the stable doors. Snow slipped through the cracks and melted into dark spots on the floor. The son took a step closer, lowering his voice further. "He gave me 3 names. Families with money, influence. He said it's the only way to save the ranch." She stopped working then. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You can't choose me," she said finally. Her tone was gentle but firm, the way someone speaks when they already know the ending. "Not now. Maybe not ever." He reached for her hand, rough from the cold and labor. She did not pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. "If I refuse him," he said, "he'll cast me out. And if I stay and fight too soon, he'll punish the people closest to me." His voice lowered. "That means you." She nodded. "I know." She had seen it happen before. Workers dismissed without warning, families forced to leave in winter. No explanations, no second chances. The father ruled through quiet consequences, not raised voices. "If you choose me," she continued, "you lose the ranch, and I lose this job. And once I'm gone, there's nowhere else like this waiting for me." The truth of it sat heavy between them. The son felt anger rise, sharp and useless. He wanted to tell her none of it mattered, that he would protect her, that love was enough. But he had grown up under that roof. He knew how empty promises sounded when fear held the power. "I don't want to lose you," he said. Her expression softened then, just a little. "You won't," she said. "Not the way you think." She stepped back, creating space between them, even as the cold filled it. "You need time. You need to think, and until you know how to stand against him, you need to let him believe he still controls you." He shook his head. "That feels like betrayal." "It's survival," she replied quietly. "For both of us." The horses shifted again, sensing the tension. One stamped its hoof, snorting. She moved instinctively to calm it, resting her hand against its neck. Watching her, the son understood something painful and clear. She had learned to endure by staying invisible. Loving her openly, right now, would expose her to the very force that had crushed others before her. "I'll wait," she said, turning back to him. "But I won't ask you to ruin yourself for me." He wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded, feeling the fear settle deeper. The stable no longer felt like refuge. It felt like a line he could not cross without consequences. As he left, the sound of her voice followed him, steady and controlled. calming the animals against the storm. Behind that calm, he knew, was the same fear growing in his own chest. And he understood that whatever choice he made next would shape not just his future, but hers as well. The first carriages appeared just after sunrise, dark shapes cutting through the white fields like moving shadows. The sound of bells and polished wheels carried across the yard, sharp and out of place. Workers straightened their coats and lowered their voices. Everyone understood what these arrivals meant. Money had come to inspect the ranch, and money expected to be entertained. The sun stood near the main house as the guests stepped down, wrapped in fine coats and confidence. The families moved as if they already owned the ground beneath their boots. Their daughters followed closely, faces composed, eyes alert, measuring everything, the land, the buildings, and him. Each smile felt practiced. Each greeting carried weight. He greeted them as he had been taught, calm and respectful, hiding his thoughts behind steady words. His father stood at his side, proud and controlled, introducing him not as a son, but as an asset. The son felt it clearly then. He was being presented, not welcomed. Inside the house, the tables were full, the food rich and carefully prepared. Conversation flowed easily for those who belonged in rooms like this. The daughters spoke of cities, of travel, of expectations. They asked polite questions about the ranch while glancing at its worn corners. The son answered evenly, aware that every response was being judged. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of movement near the stables. She was working despite the cold, focused and efficient, unaware that she was being observed. Or maybe she knew and had learned not to care. The sight of her steadied him, and at the same time, made his position feel heavier. Later that afternoon, during a tour of the grounds, the guests passed close enough to notice her. One of the daughters laughed softly, not bothering to lower her voice. Another made a comment about appearances and ambition. The father did nothing to stop it. He only smiled, as if the moment proved something important. The son felt a familiar pull in his chest, a memory rising uninvited. Years ago, when he was younger, he had watched his father dismiss a loyal worker for speaking out of turn. No anger, no shouting. Just a quiet decision that changed a life overnight. He remembered standing there, saying nothing, learning what silence could cost. The same lesson echoed now. He caught her eye briefly. She did not react. She kept working, her expression unreadable. That hurt more than if she had looked back at him for help. As evening approached, the wind shifted, and with it, the mood. One of the prized animals grew restless, spooked by noise and unfamiliar smells. The handlers hesitated, unsure. The guests stepped back, startled, voices rising in confusion. The animal lunged, its strength sudden and uncontrolled, threatening to turn panic into disaster. For a moment, no one moved. Then she stepped forward. Her voice was low and steady, cutting through the tension. She approached slowly, hands visible, movements calm. She spoke to the animal as if nothing else existed. The noise faded. The guests watched in stunned silence as control returned, not through force, but through understanding and patience. The son felt the shift like a physical blow. This was not chance. This was skill earned through years of quiet work. Lives had been at risk, and she had acted without hesitation. When it was over, the yard was silent. The danger had passed, but something else had changed. The guests looked shaken, grateful, and unsettled. They had witnessed competence they could not dismiss, yet none of them spoke her name. Praise stayed carefully indirect. Comfort returned quickly to familiar places. The father thanked her briefly and dismissed her just as quickly, restoring order as he saw it. The moment closed like a door. That was the twist the son could not ignore. Worth had been revealed clearly, and still denied. He understood then that this choice was no longer only about love or duty. It was about the kind of man he would become if he continued to stay silent. As the guests settled back into their conversations, the son stood apart, caught between memory and consequence. He remembered the boy who had watched injustice and learned to survive by doing nothing. He felt the weight of becoming that man again. Across the yard, she returned to her work without looking back. The snow kept falling, indifferent as ever, and the son realized that whatever came next would demand more than patience. It would demand a decision that could no longer be postponed. The announcement was meant to be simple. Chairs were arranged in the main room, the fire burning high. The guests gathered close enough to feel important. The wealthy families sat together, confident and relaxed, already imagining outcomes that favored them. The father stood at the front, posture firm, voice ready to seal the future he had designed. The son stood beside him, outwardly calm. Inside, every thought pressed forward at once. He had slept little. Each hour of the night had been spent weighing risk against consequence, fear against regret. By morning, the choice no longer felt like a choice at all. "My son will speak," the father said, stepping back slightly. It was meant to look generous. It was not. The room quieted. All eyes turned to the son. He felt the familiar pull to comply, to soften words, to delay. He ignored it. "I won't be marrying any of you," he said. The sentence landed hard. For a breath, no one reacted, as if the words had not registered. Then the room shifted. Murmurs spread. One of the daughters stiffened. Another looked to her parents, confused and offended. The father's face darkened. "You will explain yourself," he said, voice low but sharp. "There's nothing to explain," the son replied. "I won't trade my life or this ranch for an agreement that demands silence and obedience." That was when order broke. Voices rose. Chairs scraped the floor. The families spoke at once, some angry, some wounded, all certain they had been wronged. The father raised his hand, restoring control the way he always had. "You are done here," he said to his son. "You leave today." The words were final. No discussion, no appeal. The son nodded once. He had expected this. What he had not expected was how light he felt hearing it spoken aloud. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Across the room, she stood near the wall, unnoticed by most. When their eyes met, she understood immediately. Her expression did not change, but she stepped back, already preparing herself. This was the consequence she had warned him about. She left quietly, returning to the stables to gather what little she owned. No one stopped her. The guests began to leave soon after, offended and unsettled. The future they had imagined had vanished, and they wanted distance from the embarrassment. The father remained standing, watching his son with a look that held both anger and disbelief. "You've destroyed everything," he said. "Not everything," the son answered. Hours passed. The house emptied. The yard grew still again. The son waited, knowing the moment was not over yet. He had made his refusal public. Now came the gamble. As dusk settled, a familiar figure rode into the yard, coat dusted with snow, face tight with urgency. A loyal ally, someone the father had underestimated years ago. He dismounted quickly and went straight to the father, handing over documents without ceremony. The son watched as his father read. Slowly, the color drained from the older man's face. What is this?" the father asked. "A finalized agreement," the ally said. "Signed this morning. Rail access secured, land disputes settled, no loans, no marriages." The room went silent again, but this time, the silence held something new. The son stepped forward. "I've been working on it for months," he said. Quietly. "I knew the alliances you wanted would come with conditions we'd never escape. So I found another way." The father looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Control, the tool he had relied on for decades, had failed. Fear had not worked. Obedience had not held. The ranch was safe. The realization settled slowly, painfully. The son was no longer dependent. The leverage was gone. Outside in the stables, she finished packing, believing the worst had happened. She had done what she always did, accepted loss without protest. When footsteps approached, she braced herself for dismissal. Instead, she heard his voice. "It's over," he said quietly. "But not the way you think." She turned, uncertainty written across her face. For the first time, hope felt dangerous. The balance of power had shifted. The ranch would survive without sacrifice, and the sun had finally stepped out from the shadow that had ruled him for so long. Morning came without ceremony. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the ranch quiet under a pale sky. Smoke rose from the chimneys, thin and steady, and the land looked the same as it always had. Yet everything beneath the surface had changed. She was in the stables, doing what she always did, moving through routine as if routine could protect her. Her belongings were packed and set aside. She had learned long ago not to wait for permission or promises. When footsteps sounded behind her, she did not turn right away. "I told you it wasn't over," his voice said. She faced him slowly. "Your father disowned you." "He tried," he replied. "But the ranch is secure. The guests are gone. The deals are done." She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for the careful distance he had learned to keep. Instead, she saw resolve. Not anger, not defiance. Choice. "I didn't save you," he said before she could speak. "I made sure no one could use you as leverage again." The words landed carefully. She had never wanted to be someone's secret or burden. She stepped closer, but she did not reach for him. "And now?" she asked. "Now I choose openly," he said. "Not as an escape, not as a rebellion, as a partner." Silence stretched between them, filled with years of restraint and fear. Accepting him would mean stepping into a life that had never made room for her. Declining him would mean walking away from something she had guarded quietly for a long time. "I won't be rescued," she said. "I know," he answered. "That's not what this is." They stood there as equals for the first time, neither asking the other to shrink. When she nodded, it was slow and deliberate, a decision made without pressure. The wedding was small. No banners, no speeches meant to impress. Workers gathered instead of elites, faces weathered and honest. There was laughter, careful at first, then freer. The land watched, unchanged, as it always had. The father stood apart, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When it was over, he approached his son. No apology came, no praise either, but there was a nod, brief and restrained, acknowledging a strength he could no longer deny. Winter returned to its place as a season, not a threat. The couple stood together at the edge of the fields, looking out over ground that no longer felt like a cage. They did not know what the future would demand. They only knew it would be faced side by side. The wind moved across the land, steady and cold, but it no longer decided everything.